For decades, Canadian buyers built Florida's seasonal economy, sometimes making up a quarter of all foreign home purchases and fueling entire towns for half the year. But in 2024, that pipeline is drying up fast. Why are Canadians fleeing America's sunniest state? And what does this reveal about the risk no one saw coming? Every winter, as temperatures drop across Canada, entire towns in Florida prepare for the familiar arrival of their northern neighbors. For decades, Canadians have not just visited, they have formed the backbone of Florida's seasonal economy. National Association of Realtors data shows that in peak years, Canadians accounted for as much as 1/4 of all foreign home purchases in the state. In certain coastal markets that share stretched even higher, with Canadian ownership especially concentrated in condos and waterfront properties. The impact extends far beyond real estate transactions. Canadian snowbirds typically spend 3 to 6 months in Florida each year, transforming the rhythm of local economies. Restaurants, golf courses, and medical clinics adjust staffing and services to match the seasonal influx. Rental agencies rely on Canadian property owners to supply and occupy condos through the winter, while property managers count on long-stay tenants who pay on time and expect high standards. Municipal budgets in counties like Collier, Lee, and Miami-Dade have come to depend on the property taxes, tourist development taxes, and sales tax receipts generated by this annual migration. In Naples and Fort Myers, local officials track snowbird arrivals as closely as hurricane forecasts. From hospitality jobs and retail sales to construction projects and healthcare services, the Canadian presence has shaped the modern Florida winter. This is not a marginal boost, it is a foundational layer. The seasonal pattern, with Canadians spending entire quarters in state, has allowed businesses to invest, hire, and expand with confidence. When Canadians show up, the lights stay on, the tables stay full, and the local economy hums through the quieter months. Canadian buyers who once flocked to Florida now face a new economic reality shaped by forces beyond the state's borders. The Bank of Canada rate hikes from 2022 through 2024 pushed Canadian mortgage rates to their highest levels in over a decade. For a retiree in Ontario or Quebec, the cost to borrow against home equity, often the source of funds for a Florida condo, jumped sharply. At the same time, the Canadian dollar's decline against the US dollar has quietly but powerfully eroded purchasing power. In 2014, a $500,000 US dollar Florida property cost around 550,000 Canadian dollars. By 2024, that same home required nearly 700,000 Canadian dollars, even before factoring in rising US prices. National Association of Realtors data shows the impact. Canadian buyer searches dropped 20% year over year, and the share of Canadians among all foreign buyers in Florida has fallen well below historic highs. Many agents now report more Canadian sellers than buyers in coastal markets. The numbers tell the story of a middle-class snowbird squeezed out. Not by lack of interest, but by math that no longer works. For those still considering a Florida purchase, the financing squeeze is real. Higher rates at home mean less equity to tap, while the weak Canadian dollar inflates every US dollar spent. The result is a sharp drop in affordable options for the typical Canadian retiree. Florida has not lost its appeal, but for many, it has simply become unattainable. Mexico now sits at the top of many Canadian snowbirds' spreadsheets. A beachfront condo in Playa del Carmen or Puerto Vallarta often sells for half the price of a comparable Florida property. Annual insurance costs in Mexico typically range from $800 to $1,500, while HOA fees rarely approach US levels. Residency is straightforward. Mexico's temporary resident visa welcomes retirees with moderate income, allowing stays of up to 4 years and it is easily renewable. For a couple from Ontario or Alberta, the math is clear. Lower upfront costs, lighter annual expenses, and a growing Canadian expat community. Affordable. Costa Rica draws a similar crowd, offering pensioner visas for those with a steady retirement income and access to public health care for $100 a month. Modern homes near the Pacific Coast routinely list for $250,000 to $400,000. Private insurance, if desired, costs a fraction of Florida's rates. The appeal is not just financial. Costa Rica's stable government and established expat networks provide reassurance for long-term stays. Secure. Portugal and Spain have entered the conversation too. Both countries offer residency visas for retirees and property investors. The D7 visa in Portugal, or Spain's non-lucrative visa, opens access to subsidized EU healthcare, with property prices in the Algarve or Costa del Sol often under $400,000. Caribbean islands like the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos target retirees with tax incentives and less hurricane risk than Florida's Gulf Coast. For Canadians watching costs climb at home, these destinations offer not just a discount, but a sense of predictability. One former Florida snowbird said they wanted sun and security, not a spreadsheet full of surprise bills. Predictability. Restaurant receipts in Fort Myers tell the story before the headlines do. January through March, tables that once filled with Canadian regulars now sit empty on weeknights. One owner who has tracked winter sales for a decade watched revenue drop 18% compared to the same stretch in 2019. That shortfall is not just a blip, it is a warning. Seasonal hiring was cut by a third, and suppliers started reducing deliveries. Across town, a boutique hotel that used to book solid through April now closes entire wings midweek, citing a 22% drop in average occupancy. Hospitality tax receipts in Collier County confirm the pattern. The county's January through March revenue from hotel and short-term rental taxes fell by nearly 9% year over year, according to public records. That is millions lost, money that funds local projects and public services. In Naples, city officials postponed a planned park renovation, citing uncertainty over next year's budget. The ripple spreads. Medical clinics that once scheduled extra staff for snowbird season now report lighter patient loads. Rental agencies facing a glut of vacant condos offer discounts rarely seen in peak months. For small businesses, the missing Canadian snowbirds are not just a statistic. They are the difference between surviving the off-season and shuttering for good. The strain is visible in every receipt, tax statement, and payroll ledger, as Florida's seasonal economy absorbs the shock of a vanishing customer base. Condo association treasurers across Florida now face a different kind of ledger. The loss of Canadian cash buyers has left units lingering on the market, and the safety net for liquidity is gone. Insurance premium invoices show annual costs that have doubled or even tripled since 2021. What was once a $3,000 bill can now top $8,000 or more. In buildings with deferred maintenance, owners are being handed special assessment notices from $30,000 to $100,000 per unit, often with little warning. These numbers appear in black and white on official paperwork. A demand for tens of thousands due in months just to keep the building solvent and insured. For many, the math no longer works. Listings pile up, and the prospect of owning a Florida condo feels less like a winter escape and more like a financial trap. Florida's economic outlook now rests on four interlocking pillars: foreign buyer demand, insurance market stability, condo and HOA financial health, and the seasonal tourism pipeline. When any one of these weakens, the strain is manageable. But when two or more falter together, the risk compounds across the region. County governments and business leaders are watching for clear warning signs. Condo vacancy rates approaching 15%. A spike in insurer withdrawals or non-renewals. Special assessments exceeding $25,000 per unit in major buildings. Hospitality tax receipts falling more than 10% year over year. These are the thresholds that can tip a local market from stress to crisis. Tracking these indicators is not just a bureaucratic exercise. It is the only way to know if Florida's vulnerabilities are converging toward a deeper downturn, or if the region can absorb the shock and stabilize before the next season arrives. Right now, Florida's economic foundation depends on foreign trust, and that trust is eroding fast. When foundational buyers leave, collapse is not an event. It is a process. Whether Florida adapts or unravels will shape American real estate for years. What would you watch for next? Let me know below.